There are these perceptions that HRT will make you 35 again, and it will not. Menopause can sometimes be a time when relationships really start to flounder, and some relationships end. A lot of these menopause marketing people capitalize on women's desperation. But I think it's about the age around which the menopause transition happens. You all of a sudden stop being really worried, stop being so worried about what people think. Yeah. The freedom to just kind of speak your mind is, to me, one of the best things.
What is the brilliant thing about menopause?
No periods.
Oh gosh, no periods, of course. Welcome to the Visionary podcast, where we discuss science, medicine, physical health, and mental well-being. Nneka, I remember you saying in one of the conversations you had online that one-size-fits-all approach towards menopause care is not the correct thing. So how do you personalize treatment then? When I talk about personalization, true personalization, do you draw blood? Do you measure biomarkers, these kind of things?
So in general, not. And I think that the main reason for that is because as yet there are no, I think, really well-established ways to truly personalize medicine or menopause care. But the way that I personalize is I try to find out, first of all, why someone's come to me, what is troubling them the most, what they want out of the consultation, and then work with them to try to resolve whatever the problem is that they're experiencing, but also to use it as an opportunity to educate them about what the reason that they're going through what they're going through, what can be done, what is known, what is not known, but ultimately to be able to answer the question, so what do you want most from this consultation? And for the answer to be what they want to get out of it.
Yeah. Perhaps you could give us an example, please. Like, say one woman comes to you with debilitating hot flushes, another one with insomnia and mood swings. How might your approach be different between them?
Okay, so I think the first thing, if this is, so I think the first thing to do is to truly establish whether this is truly something related to the menopause transition. So I'm just talking about this from the point of view of the menopause clinic. So is this woman in menopause or perimenopause? Because if that's the case, then the likely cause of her symptoms is related to what's happening with her estrogen levels. So we have a conversation about the likely cause. There may be other things contributing. So it could be that she's, has very stressful circumstances at the moment. She has problems in her family, she has problems with her job and so on, that may be compounding the underlying problem. But the underlying problem is likely that it's related to her hormones. So we have that conversation. We have a conversation about what is the worst of her symptoms. And the reason we do that is because, so if she has hot flushes, and we know that estrogen, HRT helps hot flushes, helps sweats, helps brain fog, helps loss of libido. But if her main problem is lack of energy, there can be lots and lots of different things that can be related to lack of energy. If it's likely that she's in the menopause transition, we talk about the potential benefits of HRT. If she is somebody who says, yes, I would like to try HRT, then we would do that. And then she would be able to say, well, the HRT has or hasn't helped X, Y, Z. But if she has a symptom that is less clearly associated with menopause, it's important that she understands that HRT might not help. The other thing also is that there is this perception that once you start HRT, everything is fixed. But for some women, they note that they have an improvement. But for some women, even though you adjust the dose and you check the levels in their blood and everything seems okay, they still say things are not quite right. At that point, you have to think about what other things might be done. But for some women, it sometimes comes to a point where you say, well, we've really tried everything and you've tried everything. This is as good as it's going to get. Yeah. And then the conversation is about, well, okay, is this as good as it's going to get acceptable to me? But I think there is something about managing expectations, because rightly or wrongly, I think there are these perceptions that HRT will make you 35 again, and it will not. We know that.
No?
We know, unfortunately not, Hala. It would be really nice if it did, but it doesn't. We are all getting older, and with age sometimes comes, situations that are perhaps not the way they were when you were younger.
Yeah, and many women express feeling like they are not being themselves anymore. We changed to menopause and years before that, emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah.
Do you recommend counselling as part of your holistic approach?
Yes, if women need it, and there's lots and lots of kinds of counselling. So I think, in general, if particularly with physical symptoms, most physical symptoms related to menopause can be relieved by just replacing the hormones that you're not producing anymore. Simply that. But there are some women who really do have a significant psychological impact that HRT doesn't completely resolve. And sometimes, and often, I think, those psychological issues are related to other things that are happening in their life, or that menopause has sometimes uncovered things that perhaps have happened in the past. And so counselling may be helpful to sort of understand that. Counselling may also be helpful for people who start to have problems with their relationship in menopause, because I said earlier that often women experience problems with sexual activity, for example, and subsequently problems with their relationships. Unfortunately, menopause can sometimes be a time when relationships really start to flounder, and some relationships end because of menopause. And it's possible that if a couple had access to counselling to be able to talk through their problems, that perhaps those relationships might have been saved. And so counselling may be helpful to support relationships, but also just because of the changes in self-esteem, the changes that women sometimes go through psychologically just on their own behalf, maybe that affect them at work, for example, that affect their performance at work. Sometimes people do need sort of counselling or coaching or support to help them to continue to function at the level that they are used to.
Yeah, is that why your clinic includes psychosexual therapists?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you treat menopause along with heart issues, bones, mental, sexual issues, all in one place, right? So it seems that we have those traditional silos in medicine. What barriers exist to applying this integrated model in the NHS?
So, I think the reason that it's possible to have all of these conversations in a private setting is because you have the luxury of time. The average consultation, as I'm sure you know, in general practice is 10 minutes. In many NHS menopause services, it's not much more, maybe 20. And that's not enough time to address all the different issues that come up for people going through menopause. And so being able to have time may be considered a luxury, but it's not a luxury. I think it's a necessity. So that and how we, and the challenge I think always for the NHS is about time, because there are so many people who need to be seen, and the resources within the NHS are limited. And so I think there will always be that challenge. How can the NHS maybe overcome some of those challenges? Because I think there probably will never be enough people to, people resource in the NHS to manage the demand from all the people who need services from the NHS. So how can the NHS work with other organisations, other agencies, work with individuals themselves to help them to get the support that they need? And this is where I think private-public partnerships may help. They're being considered and hopefully being developed. I haven't seen any such things with regard to menopause. But there's also something that I think is also helpful with regard to things like peer support. So as I said, peer, P-E-E-R.
Yes.
So, as I said, I'm an HIV physician. And something that is really important in HIV services is having people who are living with HIV having the support of other people living with HIV who have been through what they've been through, because you may or may not know, a diagnosis of HIV is often a quite traumatic diagnosis. It's much better now than it used to be. People with HIV can have a normal life expectancy. People on treatment can't transmit HIV to their sexual partners if they have a suppressed viral load. There are lots of really, really good things about where we are with HIV now. There's really effective treatment, but there is still often a psychological component to the diagnosis of HIV. And some people need psychological help. Some people need to see a psychologist. Rarely they might need to have, psychiatric input, but actually many people benefit from seeing someone else who's been diagnosed with HIV and is living their life and thriving and in a position to support other people. And the same, I think, and many of these peer support workers or peer support individuals work within HIV services, so they're part of the team. And I think that for women going through menopause, to hear about the experiences of other people who've been through the same thing, support them in a way that actually helps them without them needing to be referred to psychological medicine services, which we know are overstretched. There is not enough capacity inside in psychological medicine services. How can we help people with a condition support other people with a condition within the NHS to help with capacity, but also in a way that then gives, I guess, makes them feel valued, that they are helping somebody else. There are lots of things I think that the NHS can think about to make the experiences of people who use their services better.
Hi, I'm Hala, your host today. If you're enjoying what you see, please hit that lovely subscribe button. It will mean a lot to us. Or maybe a small podcast now, but with your support, we can build this channel together, one step at a time. Thank you so much for being part of it. And in terms of educated women like myself, what is the most common mistake women make when it comes to their hormonal health?
I think, and I don't want to disrespect influencers, but the idea that because someone has 2 million followers, they automatically have knowledge, I struggle with that.
Yes.
Because some influencers are incredible, and some influencers are influencers because they do have knowledge and share that knowledge in beneficial ways. But many influencers don't have knowledge, or they have experience based on, in science, N equals 1. So their own experience that they then try to say must be everybody else's experience. And the things they say have no basis in fact or in science, but because they have 2 million followers, people think, oh, they must know something. But why? Why must they know something? And many influencers, I think, perpetuate misinformation, not through their own fault because they don't know. But if you're going to be an influencer, try to get the facts and convey the facts and share the facts, and don't just say something because it sounds good. Because there are lots of people who may not be able to do all the research that needs to be done to be able to understand. And it's just easier to hear what someone says on TikTok, but what someone says on TikTok may not necessarily be the truth.
This begs the question, how can I discern trustworthy treatments from marketing hype and unregulated treatments when others online claims about bespoke hormone cocktails?
So it's a good question. And the thing is, I think it's always going to be a problem. And the thing about menopause is a lot of these menopause marketing people capitalize on women's desperation. I think the one thing, people talk about AIs and the risks and so on, AI and the risks and so on. But actually, using AI to do basic research, I think is really helpful because AI can trawl through a whole lot of information really quickly. So, so if you want to know, you and it depends on the questions that the prompts you use. But, a simple prompt would be, you want to find out about a particular product. You put into AI, please show me the evidence, the research evidence that this works. And AI is really good at doing that. But also the onus, I think, is on people, on the people who are saying something works to prove it. So if someone says, we have research that says that this works, we need to say, show us the research. And then we also need to be clear about, if that research was in 10 women, we need to understand that 10 women is not research. That is not enough for you to be able to make a conclusion that something works or that it's safe. So I think we need to challenge the people who say that X is X to prove that X is X. If someone comes to me and says, you've been talking about HRT, can you show me that it's safe and that it's effective? I can show you hundreds of research papers that are rigorous research papers that have been tested many, many, many times, and the results have come out exactly the same. And I can say to you, look, these are the data. All the people who are professing to be marketing things that are effective, they also need to be challenged to prove that what they are marketing is truly effective and safe.
We talked a lot today about the challenges of menopause, but I think you touched on the positivities of menopause. What is the brilliant thing about menopause?
No periods.
Oh gosh, no periods. Of course. Who wants to bleed? Oh, sorry, guys. Who wants to bleed for a few days every month? And maybe not worrying about pregnancy when the time comes.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't want to, I say very glibly, no periods. There are some women who really like their periods, and
choose
seriously,
me one.
No, honestly,
Really?
I have some patients who are really upset when they became menopausal, because having periods was such an important part of them. So I don't want to disparage that, but I think most women who I know are happy when their periods stop. Also, because when your periods stop, you don't have to spend all this money buying sanitary products, which actually the amounts of money build up that you spend on sanitary products. So, but again, for women who really don't want to have to worry about pregnancy, and again, there are women who really do want to continue to have babies into older age. For women who don't, menopause is freeing from that point of view. The other thing about and this isn't specifically about menopause, but I think it's about the age around which the menopause transition happens. You all of a sudden stop being really worried, stop being so worried about what people think. Yeah. The freedom to just kind of speak your mind is, to me, one of the best things.
Yes.
And I don't mean speak your mind to upset people or offend people, but suddenly it's like, well, this is my opinion. I don't really care what you think about me. I used to be so worried about what people used to think about me when I was younger. Now it's just like, this is who I am, and you may not like it, but it's who I am. And I don't set out to offend people. That's not what I mean. Yeah. But I am more comfortable being honest about things that perhaps I would maybe have shied away from before. And that, I think, doesn't necessarily come with menopause, but it comes with the age around which menopause happens. And it's so freeing, honestly. Something to look forward to.
Yeah, you become mature in a way. I read or heard you talking about letting go, and that's something that you aspire to do, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I can't believe I said that. But I think sometimes when you're younger, and this was certainly the case with me, I always felt I had to be in control of what was going on around me.
Yes.
And now I ask myself, why? There are some things that you have no control over. So just... but because the thing is, the things that you don't have any control over are a constant source of worry. And so you spend all your time worrying about these things that actually you cannot control. And they just take up too much of your brain and too much of your energy, when actually it would be much better just to focus on the things that you control and make sure that you can control and make sure that you do them well. And this is something my husband has always said to me, like, don't worry about things that you can't control, but worry about the things you can. And the other things will sort of sort themselves out. And but it's hard.
It is.
It's hard.
I had struggled, I think, for the bulk of my life with this art of letting go, because I've always rationalized it in a way, in a different way. I thought, okay, if I don't pursue something, or if I don't tackle a specific problem, it will have a way of coming back and bite me in a stronger or more exaggerated manner. But now I know that being part of being a mature adult is to distinguish between delaying unavoidable conflicts and choosing peace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe those things will come back, but then you deal with them when they come back, because you can't anticipate every single thing. You can't, there are some things you worry about that are never going to happen. And then you spend all this time worrying about them and they weren't going to happen. So worry about them when they happen, if you need to worry about them, and just, yeah.
Please share with us, if you don't mind, what surprised you most about going through menopause yourself?
I think the thing that surprised me most, actually, given that I have seen hundreds of women who have gone through menopause and struggled with menopause, has actually been, I think, how lucky I've been, to be honest. I had very few symptoms, and actually my main symptoms were hot flushes, and they weren't as bad as some of the hot flushes that I've heard my patients talk about. And I don't really know what I was expecting, to be honest. It's interesting because I think you only really think about menopause. And the only reason I started to think about menopause, honestly, was when I started to see my patients going through menopause, my patients with HIV. Otherwise, I had no interest in it at all. But then as I started to approach the age at which menopause was likely to start being a problem, I started to think about it. And I think I sort of anticipated it. But I think one of the reasons that perhaps menopause wasn't as bad for me as it has been for some of my patients is, one, because I knew about it, because I'd had all this exposure to women, to my patients. And because I started HRT fairly early on, in the sense that I had some hot flushes, and I started HRT while my hot flushes were fairly mild. I don't know whether that had an influence on what happened subsequently, because I have no idea what my menopause would have been like if I hadn't started HRT or not. So I don't know whether I kind of modified the course of my menopause by starting HRT fairly early. But looking back, I am grateful that I haven't struggled with menopause as much as some of the women I have spoken to.